Isn't it a lovely day?
Yes.
Isn't it a lovely day to gather with God's people?
Yes.
Isn't it a lovely day to gather with God's people and be led by some lovely musicians and a fine young man? Isn't it a lovely day?
Yes.
Very glad to be here this morning and to open God's Word, but we will ask God to be with us as we do that. Let's pray. Father, we do thank you that you are the God who speaks, and that's what we're trusting in this morning. Not my skill or anything, but your Spirit at work in us to help us to hear your voice through this passage. And we pray that you would do that for your glory. Amen. A lot of people will tell you that when you become a Christian, you'll be happy, that your life will be easy and that everything will be wonderful. We sing some songs that almost promise that sometimes. Happy Day, all sorts of songs like that. But Jesus told us that being a Christian is going to be difficult. Jesus told us that being a Christian would bring opposition and sometimes persecution. And I don't know, has anybody experienced that? When you become a Christian, people who were your friends gave you a bit of a hard time about it. Are there any people who've experienced it when you take a Christian stand at work or at uni or at school or amongst your friendship group? People mock you for it. They laugh at you or they tease you or they put pressure on you to change your mind. Anybody experienced that kind of pressure, that kind of opposition? Some people have. Sometimes our struggles are from within. It's me I'm battling against. But sometimes we also get opposition from outside. Sometimes we'll get mocked. Sometimes we'll get pressured. Sometimes we'll get mistreated. And I think sometimes it's because it's that tall poppy thing. There's something... I think selfish people hate faithfulness. I think people who've debauched themselves and are now desolate, they hate piety and nobility and the good things. I think there's something in faithless people that they hate faithfulness. And I'll just give you an example of that. You remember the movie Titanic? Anybody remember that movie? The plot line of that movie, I think, was so typical of so many Hollywood movies. Pretty young girl who's engaged to someone else, falls in love with a young man, and the one she's engaged to is a pig. He's nasty. He's not a very nice guy at all. And so the marriage that in Christian understanding is full of love and gentleness and respect and cherishing is nasty. And in the movie, the love, the inspiring part, is someone cheating on their fiancé. Like, how many movies have you seen that where the true love, the inspiring love, the romantic part is someone actually being faithless? Someone actually turning their back on the vows they've made. Someone not honouring someone who they've made commitments to. There's something in Hollywood that hates the faithfulness of marriage. That will not admit that, as the statistics tell us, married people are happier, are healthier. And that love is the best love when we work at it and have it in a Christian marriage. There's something about faithless people. They hate to see faithfulness and they can't stand it. There's something about cowards that hates courage. And I think that's what we're seeing in this chapter. The Jewish people have come back to their city. So you've got to remember, don't you, that there was a nation called the people of Israel. God created them from one person. He said, I'm going to make you into a nation so that I can bless the world. And then over the generations, they became a nation. They had a country. Their capital city was called Jerusalem. They had a temple there where they worshipped God. But they kind of got confident. They became selfish. They stopped being faithful to God and they made it all about themselves. And so God sent in a foreign army to destroy that temple and to level the city and to take them off into slavery. Where we are here in the history is the people of God have come back to that land, but it's hard work rebuilding it. But they're trusting God and they're being courageous and they've decided we will rebuild the walls around our city so that it's a real city, so that we can be safe, so that we can have an economy, so that we can prosper, so that we can make ourselves into a real place again. And if we pick it up in chapter 4 now, what you see is the guys around And some of them have those funny names because it was a while ago. Sanballat. I love that name. Sanballat. And then his mates, and we know they were Ammonites, so up in verse, what number is that? 6 and 7. Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, the Ashdodites. So they're people around who were living in their towns, in their communities, and who see walls being built in Jerusalem again, and there's two things. That makes Jerusalem safe from them and their attacks. And so there's a new power coming in Jerusalem, and they don't like that because that makes them a little bit fearful. But also they see that the Jews are being courageous, they're trusting God, they're doing something, they're moving ahead, and they don't like that either. And so they mock. You see that in the first paragraph of chapter 4. That happens so often, doesn't it? When someone's trying to do something worthwhile, when someone's trying to do something important, when someone's trying to do something difficult, how easy it is for our human nature to mock them and to laugh at them. You think you're going to build those walls? Now there's half truth in what they're saying. It's a very big job. You think you're going to succeed? You guys are hopeless. You're nothing. This is like kindergarten. Remember back in kindergarten when, like, in school people would give you the loser thing? Which hand is it? I can't remember. I must be a bit of a loser because I can't even remember. I don't know. Loser. You know, that's one of the biggest taunts. Like, nah, you're a loser. That's what these guys are doing. They're saying, you're not going to build it. And even a fox, if he climbed up on your walls, he'd knock it over. Now, foxes are dogs, but they're kind of one of the most feline dogs. They're so light-footed, and they kind of sneak in, sneak out. And that's what he's kind of saying. You know, as something as light-footed as a fox, just tiptoeing up that wall would knock it down. So they're really having a go at them, mocking them, trying to belittle them and discourage them and make them feel stupid, make them feel weak, and just get them to give up. Part of it, I think, though, is just those mockers trying to make themselves feel better, isn't it? See, they're actually talking to each other, saying all those things. Will they ever finish it? Can they bring these burnt stones back to life from the mounds of rubble? They're talking to themselves and kind of having a real laughing session, and they're making themselves feel better, bigger, stronger, smarter, but it's actually just mockery. That's one of the things we've got to be careful with mockery, is that it makes us feel smarter or braver or stronger. But actually there's a lot of cowardice in mockery. There's a lot of nastiness. It's kind of fairly shallow and fairly cheap. It's a shallow and cheap way to make yourself feel better than others. You've got to be very careful whenever you're in a conversation where you find the group speaking negatively about someone else. Because it's a very, very cheap and nasty way to make yourself feel good. Some churches make that their thing. You know, that Pharisee thing. We're better than everybody else. Oh, look at them, what they wear. Look at them, how they speak. Look at them, what they do on Saturday. It's very easy to fall into that mode of speaking negatively about others to make yourself feel better about yourself. That's mockery. And as Tom read in Psalm 1, it's not God's way. Don't sit with the mockers. Don't be part of those who think they're better than others and are so ready to put others down. Don't be like that. So the people, the neighbours, the enemies mock, and they're kind of taunting. But look at what happens in verse 6. Listen, our God, for we are despised. The people, and Nehemiah here leading them, Nehemiah who's writing it, turn straight to God. Listen, our God, for we are despised. So they're being mocked. They know everybody around them is laughing at them, thinking they're not going to finish it. And what they do is turn to God. And I think this is wonderful. This is fantastic. So why did they get into the exile? Why did they go off to Babylon? What has been the problem? They haven't turned to God, they've trusted in themselves. And now, when they're in trouble, what do? Turn to God. It's so exciting. This is a really exciting chapter. They turn to God and they commit the bad guys. They say, God, don't cover up their guilt, but you look after them. Don't let their guilt be erased from your sight. They've taunted, they've provoked, they've been been kind of trying to discourage the builders. God, you look after them. We're turning to you. We're trusting you. And I think that's really exciting. But what it means, though, is because they trust God and keep going, it goes to the next stage where the enemies start to plot. So the enemies start off by mocking, but when the people stay strong, they keep trusting God, it turns to plotting. So verse 7 there. Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, Ammonites and Ashdodites heard that we were still going. They plotted together to come and fight. They said, well, they've kept going. We're going to have to stop them. Let's all of us get together. We'll all attack them all at once, and then they'll give up. We'll stop this wall being built. Because one of the dynamics is once that wall's finished, it's not going to be easy to attack them. But while there's no wall, you can come in at some time and start killing people and then get out really easily. But once they build that wall, you can't just sneak in and attack people. So it's kind of like, well, we've got to stop them building this wall. We've got to attack them. They plotted together, look at verse 8. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and throw it into confusion. And what do the people do? Again, look at verse 9. So we prayed to our God and stationed a guard because of them day and night. They pray. They turn to God in prayer again. It's just, this is wonderful, this chapter. This is what should have been happening in the people of Israel amongst God's people all along. Troubles, turn to God. Troubles increase, turn to God. It's really exciting how they turn to God here. I do want to just note one thing. Let me just say one sentence and move on. I won't say too much about this. They pray and they're practical. Do you see that? So you don't pray and do nothing. If people tell you should just pray and then accept it, and no, they pray and then they station a guard. So you're allowed to be common sense, you're allowed to take action, you're allowed to do sensible things when you're in trouble, you're allowed to seek solutions to your problems, but it's great to pray first and then say, well, what are we going to do? So they're committing themselves to God, but trusting God doesn't rule out taking action for yourself. Do you know what I mean? So there's a lot of things, a lot of areas where Christians think that you've got to trust God and then do nothing. But no, you can trust God and be active about solving your problem. You've got too much debt? Trust God, but make some changes. You're very lonely? Trust God and look for ways to resolve that. Whatever it is. You see where I'm going. Let's get back into the passage. So the enemies plot, they plan. But that doesn't work, because what happens is Nehemiah hears about it, and they actually increase the guard. So for a short while, temporarily, while that plan is in place, they increase the guard. And what they do is they're really smart about it. At the low points of the wall, the places where it's easiest to get over and make an attack, they put extra guards there. They make their plans, and they're ready for an attack. And so when Sanballat and Tobiah and the other bad guys, they hear about that, it's like, well, we can't attack now because they're actually ready for us. They will hurt us as much or more than we hurt them. So it's off now. So by getting ready, by trusting themselves to God and getting ready, that plan is stopped. But the opposition doesn't stop there. What happens next is that the people who live out in the countryside, so there's a capital city, but there's a lot of people living in small towns and small communities around about, they say, we're being attacked. And you see in verse 10, in Judah, it's people getting very tired. It's a very stressful, very exhausting time. The strength of the labourer fails, since there is so much trouble, we will never be able to rebuild the wall. So there's some people who are saying, we're not going to get there. We're worn out, it's too hard, we're under stress all the time, we're under attack all the time. But Nehemiah and the people keep going. They trust God and they keep going. The people also say, everywhere you turn, they attack us. So while they haven't yet attacked Jerusalem, the city, they are attacking in the countryside. So people who live in that small, who maybe farm out in that small area and come back and sleep in the city at night, or maybe they live out there, but if there was a huge attack, they'd run to the city for protection. They're being attacked just as they try to go about their daily lives. And so what Nehemiah does is he reminds people of God. So have a look at verse 14 following. After I made an inspection, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the great and awe-inspiring Lord, and fight for your countrymen, your sons and daughters, your wives and homes. So when the enemies attack, they've gone from mocking to plotting to attacking. When they attack, Nehemiah says, think about other people and remember God. Remember the Lord, how amazing he is, what he's done for you in the past, how he's been with us all through our history. Remember what God has done and think of others. Think of your sons, your countrymen, your sons, your daughters, your wives and your homes. He says, like, you might be scared because you're here on this wall and maybe you'll be the first one attacked. But remember, you're here protecting your sons, your kids, your wife. Everybody back there is depending on you. So it wasn't just about you and whether you're scared, but it's about other people who are going to get hurt if you kind of give up. So remember that God is with us and what he's done, and remember the people you're protecting. That's Nehemiah's advice. And then they put in place some protections. So the rest of the chapter from 15 and on is about how they stayed ready. They kept building. The attack that was planned is off, but they might attack any time now. It's just kind of a general threat. And so they were ready. All right, make sure you've got your weapons near you. Let's keep building, but you've got kind of the trowel in one hand, the sword in the other. He said, we'll get a trumpet. If there's an attack, then come to the trumpet. So they're ready to reinforce each other. They're ready to work together, but they keep building. And that's how in chapter 6 we find out that the wall's finished, because even though they were smart and they took precautions and they made themselves safe, they were able to keep building. They kept going. That's what this chapter is about. Mockery, plotting, attacking. The people kept trusting God. And because they kept trusting God, in this chapter we see God's kingdom continuing to be built. The wall was kind of their defence, but it was also what defined them as a city. And so what we see in this chapter is God's people in God's place, building a wall, continuing to trust God, turning to God, and that's kind of how they're under God's rule. They're in relationship with God. They're following God. They're trusting him. They're walking with him. That's what we see here in this chapter. It's kind of what the Old Testament should have been all about. It's kind of what the purpose of Israel was. If you think about it, what did God want from this people? He wanted a people who would turn to him, who would trust him, who he could shape to be his people, to be a blessing to the world. That's kind of the purpose of the whole call to Abraham thing. I'll make you a nation, I'll call you Israel. If you think about it, it's the whole purpose of the Bible. It's the story of the Bible. God making a people who will follow him and be a blessing to those around them. This is what the Bible's about. This is what God is doing. This is kind of pointing forward to how God ultimately does that, builds a people for himself, calls a people to himself, makes them able to be his people, able to follow him, makes them good enough for him. Because it's through Jesus that we see this chapter actually fulfilled. Let me ask you a question. Who was someone who was mocked but kept trusting God? Who is someone who was attacked but kept trusting God, and through trusting God was able to bring people back to God? Can you see Jesus on the cross? Do you remember what happened when Jesus was on the cross? One of his friends betrayed him, and all the rest ran away. And then the soldiers came and took him away, and they mocked him. They put a crown of thorns on his head, so that's like a crown that the emperor wore, but instead of kind of bringing honour and glory, it was meant to bring pain and suffering. They slapped him, they spat on him, they put a robe on him and then ripped it off again. They would say, prophesy, who hit you? And then they whipped him as they prepared him for crucifixion. Mocked, attacked, falsely condemned, killed. This is what they did to Jesus. And yet through all of that, what did Jesus do? Trust the Father. Trust God. He trusted God through all of that. And in that, he brought all of us back to God. Because he was paying the price for all our sinfulness, all our selfishness, all our mocking, all our rebelling, all our attacking of others, all our rebellion against God. He was mocked. He was attacked. He trusted God, and we were brought back to him. So, I think this chapter is pointing forward to what Christians can do, because we see God rebuilding a people who will trust him. We see that happening here in Nehemiah 4, but we see that that's fulfilled ultimately in Jesus on the cross. So I think there's a lesson for us here then in terms of what do we do when we're mocked, when we're attacked, when life is difficult because of people who don't like that we're trying to be faithful. We're not always going to get it right, but we're trying to be good. We're trying to not tell lies at work. We're trying not to join in the gossip. We're trying not to join in the behaviour that's damaging to others or damaging to ourselves. And our friends just don't understand. Why don't you join in? So what can we do? Let me give you 5 things to think about. 5 things that I think we see in Nehemiah chapter 4, but I think 5 things that are still anyway good things to do. Number 1, look to Jesus. When they were attacked, what did Nehemiah say? Remember the Lord, the awe-inspiring Lord. Remember what God's done. Things might be hard right now, but don't forget what God has done. And this is something I say a lot, and forgive me if you've heard me say this until you're sick of it, but I look at the cross. There's days when you have doubts, isn't there? There's days where you wonder if God could really accept you. There's days where you wonder whether you really deserve God's love. There's days where you wonder whether you're going to be able to hang on. There's days where you start to believe what the other people are saying, like what happened in Nehemiah chapter 4. They said, oh, we're never going to finish. When I have those bad days, I look to the cross and I just ask one simple question. How much does God love me? That's how much, isn't it? The Father sent his Son. And Jesus, mocked, scorned, beaten, crucified, stayed faithful in obedience to the Father, in the Father's love for you. So look to Jesus. It's a hard day this day. This week's been an awful week. This year, right off. But the cross is still there. Historical fact. Jesus died on a cross. So it doesn't matter how bad 2020 gets. Christ still died on a cross. Trust what God has done. When you're very conscious of your sin, when you're very conscious of your unworthiness, when you're not sure of those enemies who are attacking you, whether they're going to win or whether... Trust what God has done. Turn to God, pray. That's always a good thing. When you're experiencing difficulty from outside or that internal struggle, pray. Turn to God. Also think of others. It can be tempting when we're being mocked, when we're being attacked. It can be tempted when we're under pressure to kind of close in and think on ourselves. I'm very prone to self-pity. I'm a big sook. So, but did you see here, Nehemiah said, remember the Lord and think of your countrymen, your sons and daughters, your wives, your homes. Think of the others that are going to suffer too. So there's an encouragement here. Don't just think about yourself, but think about others as well. When you're doing it tough, there usually is someone else as well, and you can encourage them. And then persevere. Keep on going. Sometimes you're being mocked because you're being faithful. Well, don't let that change your faithfulness, but persevere in faithfulness. Keep going in faithfulness. Let me tell you about a man that some of you will have heard of before. There was a man by the name of Hudson Taylor. Heard of him? Who's heard of Hudson Taylor? Yeah, a number of people have heard of Hudson Taylor. Um, in 1853, so this is quite a while ago, isn't it? 1.5 centuries ago. He went to China, sailed off to China when he was 21 years old. Europe, England, all the Western countries, had kind of really only just recently discovered China and become aware of China. And so trade was happening. There'd been a couple of those wars, and in all honesty, England didn't do real good by China. But the European peoples were just becoming aware that there's a whole other world off there. And missionaries were starting to send across. And there was, in 1853, maybe a couple of dozen missionaries in China who were saying, look, we can share God's love with these folk. Hudson Taylor was one of them who went across in 1853. He made a big decision. When he arrived in Shanghai, got off the boat in Shanghai, and looked around, he decided to dress like the locals. Nobody else had done that. As you can see, if you look at old missionary photos, they're in Africa in like 3-piece suits and ties and things, and it's like, what is wrong with you people? You're in Africa. But it's the same thing happened here in Australia. When the European settlers came to Australia, if you see any old colonial photos, like you'll see guys in the sawmill. You know, the guy, you know that saw that goes up and down, the guy on the top and the guy on the bottom, they're both wearing a suit. And like the guy on the bottom, he was allowed to take his jacket off. You know, like, okay, you can take your jacket off. But he had the vest and the tie and everything else on still. And it's like, you're just not dressed appropriately. But anyway, that's what they were like. They were kind of stuck in their way in a sense. But Hudson Taylor looked around and he thought, I'm trying to communicate with these people. I'm trying to learn their language. I'm going to dress like them. Well, he grew one of those pigtails that the Chinese used to wear back then before the revolution. He dressed in the kind of clothes they wear. And it caused a little bit of a stir. Unfortunately, even among Christians, other missionaries, they were kind of incredulous, like, he's gone native, you know, we're worried about him. He's not Western anymore, he's not European. And they were also critical. And at times, he received some mockery, because they were still thinking in their, like, English way is best. What did he do? He kept praying. He kept trusting God. In 1857, so he'd been there 4 years, the organisation that sent him sent out, they couldn't pay their missionaries anymore. It's like, oh, we don't have the money, we can't pay you. So what he did is resign from them, and he kept going. A little while later, he became very unwell, and he had to return to England. He studied the language, he translated the Bible, he studied midwifery so he could go back and help, and he recruited other missionaries. So, with mockery and difficulty, what did Hudson Taylor do? He struggled. He was stressed. He was anxious. He was struggling with depression. A friend of his gave him, who had a place in Brighton, which I think is on the beach, said, come and stay, have a break. You need to kind of just rest a bit. And so he went to Brighton and took a break and spent some time in prayer, turned to God, and he says this, then the Lord conquered my unbelief, and I surrendered myself to God for this service. I told him that all responsibility as to the issues and consequences must rest with him, that as his servant, it was mine to obey and follow him. He struggled. He was alone in some ways because he was doing it differently to so many others. He didn't have the support of a missionary fellowship anymore. But he turned to God and he said, God, it's my job to obey. It's your job to worry about the details. In 1876, there was 52 missionaries working with him. In 1881, he prayed for 70 more missionaries in the next 12 months, and he got 76. In 1886, he prayed for 100 more missionaries and got 102. He struggled. He was mocked. He was sometimes feeling like he was on his own. But he turned to God. He trusted God. And God blessed that endeavour. When communists took over China in 1949, the missionaries had to leave. And people thought that would be the end of Christians in China. Christians were viciously persecuted under communist China. Still are. And yet the church continues. And also, the work of the China Inland Mission, which Hudson Taylor started, continues to this day under the name Overseas Missionary Fellowship. What do we do when we're mocked, when there's opposition, when we face struggles coming from outside? Turn to God. Remember what Jesus has done for you, how much God loves you, and persevere. Let's pray. Father, we have just mentioned so briefly brothers and sisters in China who are persecuted. And as we pause and think about that, we realise that we don't really understand how bad it is for them to be arrested, to have your things taken, to be afraid of people who might be spies in your church. We ask, Lord God, that you would help them to turn to you, to remember what Christ has done, to love the Scriptures, and to persevere in sharing their faith with others and walking with you. When we also struggle here in different ways, perhaps with family who mock us, perhaps at work where we don't get treated the same as others, we ask, Lord God, help us to keep trusting you, to remember what God has done, what Jesus did for us on the cross, that we are now your children, and to stand firm and strong in our faith. We pray this for your glory, in Jesus' name. Amen.